The Tim Heal Thirsty Thursday live stream. From 7 until 9 weekly. Here's your host, Tim Heal. The Tim Heal Thirsty Thursday live stream. From 7 until 9 weekly. Here's your host, Tim Heal.
Welcome to the Tim Heal Thirsty Thursdays live stream. Well, got an exciting evening for you tonight. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm just going to double check. Yeah. Happy days. So, yes, we're going out live. Excellent. I was a little bit worried there. Couldn't hear the opening titles. Well, what an evening we've got coming up tonight. I've got some extra guests on that are waiting in the wings to come in. But beforehand, just a little bit of parish news. Next week, I've invited all the local councillors of Gosport to come and join me for a post-election broadcast or live stream to get their visions on what they see for the local area for the coming 4 years. Or the coming 2 years, depends on which ones came first. The ones that came first have got to be re-elected in 2 years' time. The ones that come second have got a 4 year. Not quite sure how that works, but there you go. Anyway, so I've invited them. Last week was quite a good one. Unfortunately, we didn't have the turnout of the opposition parties that I was expecting. However, next week, watch out if they don't turn up, because they will be our representatives. So we want them to tell us what they want to do with us in our local area next year or the next couple of years. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my first guest. Is an old mate of mine. He spent a little bit of time out of the country. He got himself in a little bit of trouble. So he kind of knows what trouble's all about. So, Chris, welcome.
Thank you, mate, for welcoming me.
You're welcome. Let's we did Chris's story a couple of a few weeks ago now, and it was a two-parter. So the first part, if you haven't seen it, it's enthralling. You see where I did that? So, and it's all about him growing up and joining the Royal Navy or the Royal Marines, which technically speaking is the Royal Navy. If you have a look at a Royal Marines ID card, it says Royal Navy on there. So just remind them that they are the Royal Navy, senior service, of course. But there you go. The second part was a little bit gritty. If you have a delicate disposition, I wouldn't recommend listening to his or watching his second half, because it may give you one or two nightmares. But anyway, welcome, Chris.
Thank you, mate. You're scaring me now. What did I say? Don't worry what I said.
Well, don't go back and watch it. It might just give you them nightmares again.
Yes. Oh, you're gonna have to excuse me too. I'm gonna sneeze. I can't think how to.
While you're sneezing, I'll drop you down and I'll bring in my next guest. Hi, Kate. How you doing?
Hello. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Are you ready to play this evening?
Bring it. Yes,
Yeah,
always.
let's have a chat. I've entitled this week's episode as a crime special, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. I'm expecting a couple of ex-coppers to turn up uh, uh, presently, who are retired now. One was a Met police officer, a firearms officer in the Metropolitan Police in London, and the other one was I think he was transport police. So when they come in, we can have a chat with them. But in the meantime, if I can ask anybody that's out there watching to click the like button, and if we want to ask a question, pop it up in the chat box. You can also subscribe to the channel and all the rest of that malarkey, and you're welcome to do that and join in the conversation. So, a little bit about Kate. Now, I had a chat with Kate a few weeks back, and Kate is a forensic psychologist. Now, Kate has had a really interesting career, and she's had a chat with some really odd types. So I should say, I mean, if you've seen the old film Silence of the Lambs with old Hannibal Lecter, well, Kate actually had a chat with him before he went to court, I believe. Is that right, Kate?
Sort of. Yeah,
Yeah.
different crimes, but same at the heart of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
multiple
Funny old
times.
story. Yeah. So, so, Kate, tell us a little bit more about what you do as a job.
Forensic psychology is not as exciting as a lot of people think it is. It has its moments, but the vast majority is I'm given a question to answer. Is this person competent to stand trial? Or what is their diagnosis? Or where would the safest place be for them to be incarcerated? Or just what now? What do we do now? Whatever. I'm given a question to answer. And so I do a combination of interviews and testing, and I do a write up. I bring it back to the person and I say, this is what I'm going to say in court, because you don't want surprises in court. That's not actually a good thing ever. And then on the day that I testify, I spend a lot of time sitting around and waiting. That is a lot of the job, until they call me in and I tell my opinion. I tell what I think about the answer to that question that they asked me. And in the US, some states you're hired either by the prosecution or the defense, and some states you're hired by the state. And I was lucky. I worked in New Hampshire, in which I was hired by the state, which means I wasn't sort of pushed to side with one side or the other. I was allowed to just say what I thought without worrying about whether they'd hire me again, because I was just employed. And so sometimes the prosecution liked what I said. Sometimes the defense liked what I said. Sometimes nobody liked what I said. That was fine.
So you know how to influence people and make friends then.
Oh, yeah, no, I was fully prepared to make people unhappy on the daily. And, there's a part of me that kind of enjoys that.
Yeah. Well, let's bring Chris back in now. Now, I believe you've gotten over his sneezing. Have you gotten over your sneezing? Is it hay fever?
No, mate. It's I was going to say less pleasant than hay fever, but if you suffer from hay fever, then there's probably nothing less pleasant. No, I'm withdrawing from opiate medication.
Oh,
I don't know if I told you, Tim, I ruptured a disc in my back again.
yeah.
Incredibly painful. Last time I had to have part of it removed. this time I have to say it's a wee bit better, but the bloody medication, it's so to kill that intensity of pain. It's quite strong meds, and the quicker you can get off that sort of thing, the better it starts to become a, unwelcome feature in your life, you can say. And it's I'm chucking this up out front. Excuse my bad behavior for the next hour. But that's it. It's one of the weird.
This is a family show, so keep the language down, Timothy.
Yes. I didn't swear, did I?
You did. I'll let you off that one.
Okay.
I was too slow on the bleep button.
Right. Got you.
Actually, I haven't got a bleep button. So in the meantime, Chris, if you just point us in the sort of direction, the sort of trouble that you got yourself into in Hong Kong a little time ago. If you want to just highlight, highlight some of the problems you had.
Yeah, well, I don't have problems in my life, Tim. And this is
solutions.
What teach me. No, we have challenges, don't we? And we have challenges, and they're what maketh the man. And I've been fortunate to have some pretty extreme ones. But it's like I always say to people, I live in paradise, and I know very few people that do. And so I'm really proud of my history, because it's brought me to a place today that I only ever could have really dreamt about. And I think it's important in this climate of poor mental health that we kind of start to frame life properly for what it is, not what the media wants to tell us it is, or the powers that be that obviously have a controlling interests. But yeah, Hong Kong. What can I say? I thought.
Did you get in trouble with the old bill out there?
Yeah, I got stopped on a few occasions. Got strip searched on one occasion in a toilet in a football stadium, because Hong Kong police, they're a kind of like law unto their own, if you excuse the pun. They're not like the brightest sparks in the book. And just seeing me sat alone in a football stadium one day, I was actually waiting for a job interview in an adjacent street in Wan Chai, which is the kind of disco land part of Hong Kong, the sort of Susie Wong legend. And yeah, it's just that, like, I waved at a policeman once in the car. This is in England now, he's coming the opposite direction. And I just said, morning. He then followed me for 20 minutes. It's this weird mentality policemen have got, that like someone says, good morning. All right. That's weird. So I'll follow him and see if I can get a crime out of it. But in Hong Kong, it's sort of even worse. It's really silly. It's almost silly to the point where if like you had big muscles, they'd leave you alone because they think you would like dead cool or something. Yeah. quite bizarre. But there I was. Fortunately, they didn't find me. It's a family show, so I won't say what I had shoved inside my boot. But it wasn't sherbet, put it that way. And yeah, it was interesting. But as I said to you, Tim, I went out there to run a cliche sort of $1 million business, having put 3 really hard years into it, whilst being full-time in the Marines. And so I was that young, naive man. I thought I'd made it in life. I thought life was that simple. You start a business, you become a millionaire. I was turning over a ridiculous amount of money every month. What's not to love? But of course, childhood trauma, it doesn't work like that. It's going to have its say. It's going to manifest. again, it's something we're really rubbish at understanding and dealing with, aren't we? And in my case, it manifested in lots of things, really. Probably behaviors that weren't helpful in general, personality traits. But for a while, it was crime, some quite serious crime, you could say. And then later on in addiction, in drug addiction. And yeah, when that happens to you don't really want to be, you don't want to be in Asia for a start. Certainly don't want to be working as a nightclub doorman on a nightclub run by the 14K triads, which was where my life sort of sent me. And it was interesting. One of my fellow doormen was an assassin. They used to smuggle him over the border into China every now and again to do a hit on someone and then smuggle him back into Hong Kong. The other chap was this hard as nails kind of foot soldier. It's a different world. It's a different world. I'd say these are all probably traits in people, almost sociopathic. Kate's probably a better one to explain this, but almost sociopathic traits. And you can only think, my God, what lives have these guys lived? Guessing they probably grew up on some awful sink estate in Hong Kong where identity was, not really a thing. Probably a lot of abuse, poverty, I'm guessing. And yeah, I mean, when it went off, when fights went off, you've never seen anything so savage. Just animalistic, really. So yeah, interesting times. But like I say, I feel lucky because before I battled addiction and completely lost my mental health, I mean, I couldn't. The doctor said I should have been sectioned for life. I was that unwell. Fortunately, it was all related to the crystal meth. It was it meant that when I stopped taking it, my mental health very quickly returned, almost bizarrely quickly, considering how ill I was. But yeah, what am I getting to is I needed these challenges, Tim. I needed it. When I look back at my young self, I've never been a bad person or a nasty person, but I was very wayward. My ideals and my aspirations of what making it in life was so far removed from any form of enlightenment. I thought it was all about money and ego and looks and materialism and real unhealthy stuff. And I'm glad that sometimes you just need I've got to watch my language, but you need a good kick where it hurts to make you realize, no, you're not, you're not invincible. You're not, I don't know, I'm going to say you're not special, but actually part of the recovery process is treating yourself a bit special, or being good, learning to love yourself for the first time, probably. So yes.
So, Kate, what's your experience of guys like Chris that have gone down that route, been on hard drugs?
I mean,
you must have seen a lot of that going through the courts.
And whether it's drugs or whether it's sober crime, the vast majority of the people that I worked with, they could have been me. They could have been you. they're as normal as any of us get. And it's a combination of the wrong circumstances at the wrong time and the wrong emotions and following some impulse or just making a bad decision. And we end up behaving in ways that we didn't plan. It's very few people who are incarcerated planned to break the rules. Like, that wasn't on their agenda, that wasn't on their bucket list. They just, they make a couple of mistakes and you get away with them, and so you make a couple more mistakes and you get away with them. But the vast majority of people I worked with, and I worked primarily in a men's prison. New Hampshire was the state that I worked in. It's very small. So I worked primarily in the men's prison, and the women's prison was so small that they didn't have full-time mental health staff. So I would just go there if they needed some form of evaluation on a given day. But I spent, like, my office was in the men's prison. So I usually use guys because that's who I worked with most often. But humans in general, it's all of these are people that could have been me. They could have been any one of us. It's really easy to fall into a pattern of behavior, and you get away with something or you don't. But I look at these people like there are convicted murderers that I worked with that I would legitimately have babysit my children. And not because I hate my kids. Like,
But you have got them locked in the dungeon for tonight.
well, it's just shackled. It's fine.
That's okay then. Are they gagged as well so they can't scream?
They're well trained.
Excellent. Anyway, when I was a lad, I was a little bit of an handful, I guess. I got caught several times by the old Bill when I was a kid and got dragged home, mainly for scrumping. We used to go out. For anybody that doesn't know what scrumping is, it's taking apples that don't really belong to you, but they're in somebody else's garden. So I got captured a few times on that. And slightly later in life, I lived up to my regiment's name, which is the Poachers. And I very, very nearly got caught poaching. Borrowing
Poaching
somebody
eggs?
else's. No, fish. I mean, trout. There's lots of them in this particular lake. That
How are you catching them, Tim?
well, it was involved with a bit of a bang. They got floated to the surface. I think that's what attracted the
Not
gamekeeper.
subtle. Yeah, not subtle.
Yeah.
Sure,
Well,
sure.
I hadn't fully thought it through, but I did have to do a bit of a runner. I did have a couple of fish to go with me. But that
Can I
was
tell you my funny story?
go on.
It's funny to me. To me, this is like the most hilarious kind of part of human nature. So I went to court for a speeding ticket once. One of those ones where you've really been going too fast on the motorway and it all gets a bit serious. And I went to court. It was in somewhere like Totnes, and the bloke sat next to me in the court. He'd been caught for doing like 3 mile over the limit, something pretty petty, and he'd had to travel all the way from somewhere near the Scottish border to the southwest of England. So best part of 1,000 miles to answer, being 3 miles over the limits. That he wasn't happy. And of course, this is Devon, and things are quite slow in Devon.
Yeah.
And so the first person up before the beak, it's like he'd shoplifted a loaf of bread. So this guy next to me who just wants to get back in his car and get home, he's like, really? Loaf of bread? Okay. Next person up, poached a salmon. And it's not a quick thing. You got to go for call the witnesses, all this kind of all this stuff presented. This and this guy just when the judge goes to call the next defendant or the next criminal, this guy says, "Oh, so what next?" Bloody stealing a vicar's bike. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Welcome.
Poor
welcome
vicar.
to our part of the world. Yeah.
I got nicked for speeding. I've been nicked for speeding twice in my life. The first time was on a motorbike. I was working out of Milton Keynes as a motorcycle courier, and we used to work for a company called Burroughs, taking computer parts to banks. So I picked this part up. I think it was about 3:30, 4:15 in the afternoon. I had to be down in Folkestone in Kent by 5 o'clock before the bank closed. I got caught on the M20 where you come out of the A. There was a stretch between the where the M20 finished, the A20. There was a bit there before you got to the last bit of it, motorway before you got down into Folkestone. And I came round, I hit the gas tap. I'm doing about 120 mile an hour on this motorbike. It was a Kawasaki Z1100 shaft drive, really going for it. And coppers were chasing me. And I came off the top of the slipway, and I sat there just trying to check the map to see exactly where I got to go. This copper come up. So I pulled over to let him go by. He went, he's got out. He says, "Do you know how fast you was going?" I says, "No, officer, I was doing about 70, maybe 75. He says, "We were doing about 130 and we couldn't catch you." I said, "Just have tried a little bit harder then." Anyway, I got nicked and I had to go to court. And I could have lost my license that day. They done me for in excess of 110. And the brief was up there, and he was saying what a good character and all the rest of it. And I'm listening and I'm thinking, who's he talking about? Ain't me. Well, it was. It got me off. Well, I say got me off. I got 6 points and an £80 fine. I thought, and I kept my license. I was lucky. The next time I got caught, I was doing 32 mile an hour in a 30, and I had to go on one of these courses. You know, these naughty boy speeding courses. Yeah, I didn't get 3 points, but I did the course and I got the cautions and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's only my experience of being nicked and in court. But I didn't get profiled by anybody. I didn't have a forensic psychologist to see whether I was fit or not to stand trial.
That you know of.
I could have been. I mean, doing in excess of 110 miles an hour, you'd have thought I'd have had to be profiled and all the rest of it to make sure I was fit to be tried. But it was up in front of the magistrate. But I had to go all the way from Milton Keynes down to Kent to get nicked or to get to the court. And I had to go on the train because I wasn't sure I was going to keep my license to get home.
It's a fascinating area. Psychology in general, but forensic psychology. It's also one of those ones where there's like a muddying of the water, and it's kind of muddied by people's anger and want for revenge. What I mean is, you're either mentally unwell or you're not, right? Or well, I mean, I guess there's a what's the word? Grade.
Yeah, there's a spectrum.
A spectrum is the word. Yeah. But it's when people are baying for someone's blood, send them down, Your Honor, life in prison, no parole, blah, blah. And it's like, well, hang on, if they're ill, they're ill. It's just that simple.
Well, the
but-
problem is for me is that the concept of being crazy, insane, mentally ill has almost nothing to do with being incompetent to stand trial or criminally insane. And I hate that they use the same words. They use the word insane for both, and they're very, very different concepts. You can be really, really sick mentally. You can have schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or bipolar or a number, you can be a full-fledged sociopath so that you meet the criteria to be hospitalized maybe or just diagnosed as insane. But that doesn't make you legally insane. And there were a lot of times where I found my job to be like they make you have a certain degree of education and certification to do what I did. And there were times where I was like, you don't need this. Like anybody can do it to figure out whether somebody is legally insane. Because the bar is so low. It's, do you know the difference between right and wrong? Do you have basic control over your actions? Are you able to work with your attorneys? That doesn't mean you do. It just means, are you able to? And are you able to understand the roles that people play in the courtroom? So who's the judge, who the lawyers are, where the gallery is of onlookers, and that for the most part, unless you are on the stand, you need to sit down and shut up. Like you don't stand up and jump on your table and scream in the middle of your trial. That's a pretty low bar. Like anybody can do it. And that's why the concept of being found not guilty by reason of insanity, people who end up in Broadmoor on your side of the pond or in state psychiatric hospitals on my side, is pretty rare that it actually goes to trial because it's pretty obvious right away that this is a person who is not in control. It's a very few number of people who make the decision that they're gonna break the law and they go and do it and they're able to try and hide their actions. That's pretty rare. For the most part, there's substances on board or there's mitigating factors that I would be called in to ask about. But people assume, I think, that I worked with a lot of really scary, really crazy people. And the answer is not, especially. Like, these are people that, 2 doors down from me. I'm pointing as though you can see, but really, 2 doors down from me. We refer to one of my neighbors as Strange Raymond. And he's an odd guy. I don't want my kids around him. Right, because he behaves oddly socially and he has a weird sense of boundaries and a weird way of communicating. That doesn't make him hospitalizable and it doesn't make him a criminal. But if he were to commit a crime, he's the kind of guy that I would have to sit and work with. But my days at work were fairly routine. Now I broke my back, so I'm on disability now. So that's why I'm speaking in the past tense. Don't do that, by the way. Back issues, terrible idea. Poor decision. But I felt safer at work than I felt on the street often, because there's a very clear understanding of how you do and do not behave in prison. And especially how you do and do not behave in reference to the staff. And they knew who I was, that the inmates knew that I wasn't a cop. I wasn't there as a CO. I was there because I had to do my job. I had to ask them questions and they could lie to me and that's fine. I would write down their lies. And I would say, I think they were lying to me, but I wouldn't, like, I can't force you to be honest or forthcoming with me. And it's sort of, it's never routine, it's never boring, but it's not fraught. I didn't carry a gun. I didn't break into people's houses. I didn't trick people into telling me things they didn't want to do. I valued being very transparent in how I functioned.
Well, we've got quite a few people watching at the moment. So can I ask anybody that's watching, if they want to ask us a question, either Chris, Kate or myself, just fire it up and we'll do our best to try and answer it. And if we can't answer it, what we'll do is we'll go away, try and find the answer and come back and let you know.
Or we'll make one up. I'm good at that.
Or we'll make one up.
If I have
Yeah,
to. That's fine. That's fine.
let's
I have a court story that I can share while we're waiting for questions. It's not my own, but when we brought inmates back to court often, not for the first, for if it's someone's first major trial, I typically didn't have anything to do with them and they were under heavy guard the whole time. But if they were returning to maybe appeal their sentence, or they were tried for a different offense, a lesser offense, that sort of thing, whatever, then it was protocol that they had to be observed at all times, but not necessarily by a police officer or a corrections officer. And so once in a while, that was me. I would sit with them, especially if I knew them already and we had sort of a rapport. And they were both watched to try and prevent escape, but they were also watched on the off chance that they would maybe confess to something they had never confessed to before, which was my biggest fear. Like, please don't do that, because if you do that, now I'm involved in your case for the rest of my life. And I don't just keep it. Like, I can't emphasize how important boring is when it comes to court. So I'm in this little room waiting for the hearing. It's a follow-up lesser offense for a man who had already confessed and been found guilty of multiple murders. So a legitimate serial killer. I can't give his name. He, by this point, was fairly elderly. And so, like, wheelchair bound elderly. And so the idea that he was going to escape, I was like, dude can't even stand up. But okay, fine. We're going to follow protocol and I'm going to sit with him. And we're just sitting there silent because I don't want to start a conversation that leads to him saying, oh, yeah, and body number 5 is here. Like, please do not. So we're sitting there sort of staring at the ceiling. No windows in the room. It's awkward. You know how it gets, right? When it's like you're trying to avoid eye contact. And he knows. He like, I was fairly young at the time, mid-20s, late 20s. And he says, I have a question for you. And I thought, oh no. Here it goes. He's going to do a thing and I don't know. Okay, what's your question? And I'm, sort of literally flinching. And he says, what did the farmer say when he lost his tractor? I said, what? He said, what did the farmer say when he lost his tractor? I'm like, what is like, am I having a stroke? What is happening right now? And he said, where's my tractor? And he laughed and laughed and laughed. Like, this just delighted him. And I asked him, I said, did you just tell me a dad joke while we're waiting for your trial? And he's like, well, we got to talk about something. So your turn. And so I spent the next 2 to 3 hours while we were waiting for his hearing to begin trading dad jokes and terrible puns with a serial killer. And it was the most fun I ever had at work. It was hilarious.
The trouble
Anyway,
is
we've got a question coming in here.
put, putting dad on the front of things, though, Kate, when you actually are a dad, then it suddenly becomes like, is that me?
Really funny. So,
Yes.
Frank Bell, do you think the woman in the Baby P case should be let out?
Can I just say a big hello to Frank, because he's a massive supporter of mine, and he's a wonderful human being, and he actually funds my podcast, and I couldn't do it if it wasn't for his input. So much love to you, Frank. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Frank. So what do we reckon? In case you don't know, Kate, the Baby P case is the mother of Baby P, who's a young child that was murdered by her mother or his mother. She was sentenced, I think it was either around 2007, and she's just been let out of prison this week, I believe. It's just been in the today's news that I mean, she murdered her own baby effectively, and now she's been let out. What do you think on that? Should she be let out or not? Should the sentence be stiffer for murdering your own child or a child?
Stiffer sentences do not decrease crime.
No.
At all. Like, at all. In fact, they make it worse. So I don't know anything about the case. I can't speak to her psychological state. But by and large, a degree of community supervision is important. Have mental health professionals involved who are aware of her stress level and her level of control. That's important. Let's do that. That can be done in the community, and it can be done pretty safely. So I look at, in the US, we're extraordinarily delighted when someone gets a life sentence or even a death sentence. And you can only scream the same thing so many times. But one of my soapboxes is sort of reserved for harsher sentences don't decrease crime. Parenting support and checking in with people and monitoring in the community. A famous UK case, Mary Bell, right? Did some terrible things as a child, did some terrible things, arguably directly related to traumas that she had experienced. There should have been consequences. I fully believe in consequences for your actions. But there comes a point where, through following the rules and following the system, she was let out. And she never reoffended. And I think that that's a sort of a sterling example of a case where there are people who would say, if you're like this as a child, you're going to be like this forever. And so lock them up and throw away the key. And I deplore that attitude.
Yeah, I mean, there was another case recently about, was it the Jamie Bulger case, where these two lads that murdered this young child, they spent time in the juvenile system and then went across into the adult system, and I believe they've been let out, and they one of them has gone on to do some reoffending as an adult. Now, whether that is to go back into the prison system because he couldn't cope with being outside, or whether he's just a nasty little bugger that it's in his nature.
And there sometimes you can tell, and sometimes you cannot.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's not a perfect answer, but I err perhaps in the direction of let's amp up the mental health services and the social supports on the outside and pay better attention to people rather than locking them up for longer periods of time. Because the vast majority of people don't reoffend once their trauma, their addiction, their stress, whatever form that stress takes, has been addressed.
I mean, should prison be a bit harsher? Maybe. I mean, certainly the prisons in this country are notorious for being fairly soft on people. I mean, they get access to the television, they get access to the internet, they get phones, they even get their drugs in snuck into prison. Perhaps if we had something like a bit of hard labour, I mean,
Well,
put them on a chain gang for a bit, just to give them that bit of punishment to think, well, when I get out, I'm not doing this again to get back in here.
That doesn't work.
doesn't
Prison does not work as a deterrent either to first-time offenders or reoffenders. It doesn't work. And the harsher you treat people, the less prepared they are to return to society after. So if you're going to hurt them while they're in prison, they're going to have a harder time being members of society after. So if you're going to hurt them, keep them there forever. And that's not the answer. So, and I'm not, I do believe in consequences to people's behavior. I want to be really clear about that. Like, I believe that the criminal justice system serves a role in society, but I think that we go about it in the wrong ways. The number of people that, like, they should have access to television, they should have access to the internet, because when they are released, these are things they're going to be expected to use. And if you don't give that option, sometimes that's one extra layer of frustration that can make them that much more dangerous. Let's instead make re-entry into society a little smoother for people. I don't know what kind of re-entry programs that you have in the UK. In the US, we have approximately none. You do the same hard labor, the same hard time from day one until your last day in, and then you're kicked out onto the street with a couple $100 and somehow expected to function again. And I mean, you think about how much your technology, your computer, your phone have changed in the past 5 years. And there's a degree to which it's difficult for me to keep up with those changes. Like, when my phone wants to do an update, I don't want it to do the update because I don't want to deal with the changes, right? And now imagine being fully without that for 5 years. And how do you function? How do you find a job? How do you communicate with people? How do you find social supports? How do you interact with family? How do you find any positive reason not to hurt people again?
Yeah. I mean, I guess reintroducing people from prison back into society needs to go through a full sort of process to be able to re-educate them, I suppose, to show them a different way of living, to show them that, because I guess the vast majority of people that end up in prison that have done something wrong they've done something wrong pretty much for a reason. I mean, whether they've had a rough upbringing or society's been harsh on them, and they've turned to a life of crime, and they finally been caught, processed, and sent to prison. Once they're in prison, then the regime in prison, certainly in this country, is I wouldn't say laxed, but it's not like in America where you're on a chain gang, but they do try and integrate people back into society. They do give them the courses. They try and give them to give them some sort of purpose when they come out. I think the problem is when they do come out is trying to find a way of resettling back into the community where they've got the advantages of being able to work and live alongside the rest of society without having that ball and chain around their neck of being an ex criminal, an ex-con. So does the whole system need to be reformed to be able to do that?
Not just the criminal justice system, but our education system. I think that we need, we teach children math and science that they may or may not use. We don't know. We don't teach them communication skills. We don't teach them how to tolerate frustration. We don't teach them how to identify threats to their safety or how to report in an appropriate way if they're being hurt. We don't teach them how to identify a safe person to talk to if they're being hurt by their parents, for instance. All of those things, anger management, what consent means. These are things we don't teach kids, and those are things that land a lot of people behind bars.
Okay, I guess it goes back to parenting, I guess, and the way that parents treat their kids. I mean, nowadays it's when I grew up as a kid, you got in trouble, there were consequences, particularly in school. I mean, in my day in school, you did something wrong, you was up in front of the headmaster, and you got 6 of the best. Now, a lot of people say that's barbaric. What it taught me is don't get caught because the consequences hurt. But I didn't do the same thing again to get caught. So I don't think it did me any harm. But I think it made me a slightly better person because I adjusted the way that I dealt with things.
I mean, you just said an interesting thing there, though, is you said what you learned was don't get caught.
Yeah, I mean, don't get caught in the first place.
Rather than behave better.
Yeah.
Prior. Yeah. And I mean, I think that there are a lot of parents who are just not equipped necessarily to raise and teach their kids in that manner. And so if we're teaching kids math and science, let's go ahead and teach them effectively psychology from day one. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, I think schools are missing the trick. They should be teaching parenting skills. I mean, when I grew up, I mean, boys did metalwork and woodwork, girls did domestic science, which was sewing and cooking. I think if they reintroduce that sort of thing back into schools, it would go an awful long way to teaching them parenting skills. I mean, have a specific course for parenting skills
Mm.
to
Sure.
teach them how to cook, to teach them how to clean, to teach them all these skills that aren't being taught in schools, and a lot of the time they ain't learning at home either. I mean,
Right.
some families, I mean, not all families, but kids don't get chores. They're either left to their own devices, or the parents don't instill the discipline to them. The parents didn't have discipline instilled in them when they was kids, so consequently, they are not good role models. So, yeah, it's if it doesn't start from a really early age, and then it just goes wrong all the time. And I guess the vast majority of people that you see going through the criminal justice system are people that have been let down by society in the first place. That they haven't had those the decent parents to show them the rights and wrongs. They haven't had the schools. They've been, because teachers are scared to be able to discipline kids nowadays, because they're not allowed to. Because if they discipline a kid, the first thing that happens, the undisciplined parents come down to the school and start shouting and screaming. Back in my day, when I got six of the best, when I was told the old man I got a levering for getting into trouble, but that's not the case nowadays, and I think that brings on a whole raft of issues that are just carry on in life, where you've got people that are undisciplined, you've got people that have been let down by society, by the school system, and end up into the criminal justice system. So you're right. If it doesn't start from ground zero, then it's just going to get worse all around, really. So what can we do to change that system? How do we, as individuals, influence that in the rounds?
I mean, we start restructuring the school curriculum, and we start teaching teachers different ways of interacting with children, and we allow a little more grace to people when they're struggling, rather than telling them, look, suck it up and get over it.
Mm.
Because life is short and difficult, and not everyone is born with the skills, and not everyone is taught the skills right now. So let's try it. That's my feeling, is like, I don't have all the answers, but I don't think the solution lies within the criminal justice system. Like, it's flawed. It's not a great system, but I don't feel that that's where the solution lies. I feel that society as a whole doesn't value mental health, doesn't value communication, and doesn't value safety. Doesn't even know what safety means. In the US, at least, I don't know the statistics for the UK, but in the US, the assumption that a lot of people hold as an example is that the most common reoffenders among criminal classes are sex offenders. They think that once a sex offender, always a sex offender. And so we have sex offender registries. I can go online if I want to and look and find out exactly who has been charged with what within a mile of my home at any time. And that's patently false. Sex offenders actually have among the lowest recidivism rates among those who've been convicted, because they literally don't know what consent means. They don't know what the rules are around whether it's age, or whether it's intoxication, or whether it's spoken consent, all of those sorts of, they just don't know. And a fairly brief, very direct class while they're incarcerated about, okay, so here's the rules, here's the laws in the state that you're going to live in, helps decrease reoffense by a lot. And so maybe we could teach kids that while they're still in school and keep them out of prison in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what drives sex offenders in the first place.
There's no such thing as sex offense as a personality trait. They're entirely different. You know, someone who engages in sex mixed with violence is very different from someone who engages in non-consensual sex due to intoxication, for instance, but they're both considered sex offenders.
Yeah. That's interesting. So Frank's just posted another question, or not so much a question, but an observation, I guess. How many kids these days would even have a paper round? I mean, paper rounds, I don't know what it's like in America, but it was always a tradition that people would be, that young blokes generally would get a paper round, and let's go around in the morning before school, take the papers, deliver them out. I'm not sure that many people nowadays actually take a newspaper. Certainly not like it was years ago.
It's not common, no.
No. So, in answer to your question, Frank, we don't think there's many kids that do paper rounds nowadays, and I think that's probably because there ain't many paper rounds to be had.
Yeah.
And sometimes kids don't generally. It ends up their parents doing the paper round for them. from what I've seen. So yeah. So has anybody else out there got any questions? And while I'm at it, can you click the like button if you got a chance? Give us a like to say that you like what we're doing, or you don't like what you're doing. Post some questions. What's this? Lead Diamond Dog says? What's that mean? Sorry, I'm watching a cat fight. Oh, he obviously got a couple of cats in his house then. So we're still waiting for some more questions to come in. I don't know where my copper mates have got to. They're probably out still working or something like that. I know one of them was at the cricket today, so I'm not quite sure what cricket he was at, but he said he might be a little bit later because he was at the cricket. Yep, can't see any other questions coming in. So, Chris, I see got some of your chaps following us today.
Yes, the Diamond Dog's one of mine.
Yeah. And Frank.
And Frank, bless him. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Means a lot to know that somebody's out there.
Well, yeah, it means a massive amount to him. I mean, these guys and girls in my life now, you know, and
yeah,
and it's very special. I sometimes find myself just wanting to go live on YouTube just because I haven't spoke to them all for 24 hours or something, and it's good. And also, you know, the great thing about carving out a niche with a YouTube channel is you get your people, you know.
Yeah.
You
absolutely.
get the people that see through the bullshit. You get the people that understand that they know the narrative. And it's nice because otherwise life can be really lonely, you know.
Do you find that now I watch an awful lot of YouTube, and that's where I get most of the information that I'm looking for from. And the amount of people that have got the subscribers, people that have watched a video, and the amount of people that click the like button, it's a massive. There must be, it must be something around about sort of 1, 2, or 3%. Certainly no more than 5% of people that watch a video don't click the like button. And I don't understand why people are so adverse and not clicking the like button. It click, it's done. I mean, it's slightly harder to sort of put a comment in because you've got to sit there and type a comment in. But to click a like button is dead simple, but they don't do it. And it's the same for subscribing to a channel. I mean, you can get channels that have got thousands and thousands of subscribers, but never watch it. And then others, you get half a dozen people subscribe to your channel, and every time you come up, they watch it and click the like button for you. But it's very difficult to get people just to click the like button. And this is going across. This is going out on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. So it's going across five platforms, all simultaneously. And although I can't see all of what's going on, we've had a consistent watch of this, and we've had a couple of likes so far. A mate, Ray and William, have clicked the like button, but all the other guys, I mean, Lee Diamond Dog and Frank Bell, please click the like button so we know you're there.
Oh, they would have already done that, because they do that for me. So
yeah,
well,
ask them nicely.
Well, you've got 8 likes on YouTube, and
all right, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't see them. But there you go.
YouTube's a whole. It's a whole thing, you know. It's a thing.
Yeah, I know.
I see a lot of people on YouTube, and they think it's just put a video and I'm going to get famous. And
thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Neil.
So I can't actually see them coming up on there. So where am I? I'm not quite sure which one I'm watching on. Oh yeah, I can see it now. I'm looking at a different. So that's on the Facebook Live. I've only got 2 clicks. So anybody that's watching on Facebook Live, if you can click the like button on there. Thanks to the guys that's clicking on YouTube. And I'm not sure what it's done on the others. I'm not sure whether Twitch and Twitter and LinkedIn have the like, subscribe type buttons on there. So the live streams that we've got coming up next week, I've got a post-election special. So if anybody wants to tune into that, now what I've done, I've warned off all the councillors and potential candidates for my area. I'm doing it for Gosport because that's where I live. Last week we had a pre-election special, and I had 4 Conservative candidates and councillors come on. I've sent the invite out again, and I did that to every single councillor and potential candidate last week, and I had a couple of replies from the Liberal Democrats saying that they couldn't make it because they were out canvassing. It would have been a great platform for them to do a little bit of canvassing, but they didn't. But I have 4 Conservatives turn up. Next week, I've emailed out everybody again and invited them all onto the show next week. So let's see what happens next week. But we had a really good show last week. If you haven't watched it and you're interested in what the council are doing here in Gosport, and I guess that a mirror out across all councils, what local councils do is an awful lot different to what the government do. But they get lots of their money from the government, and your money and the way they spend it is really interested, and the cost of things. Gosport Council are investing 9.4 million or 5.4 million pounds to redevelop the bus station and waterfront in Gosport, which is a key to enhancing the area. They've also got an awful lot of money, a couple of £1 million, to redevelop the Gosport High Street. So for anybody that's interested, have a watch of that. And next week, come along, same time, Thursday, 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock, to see councillors under the cosh. So newly elected councillors, we're going to put them under the cosh. We're going to ask them some difficult questions. We want to know about particularly recycling, because recycling in this area is pretty poor. I mean, they just recycle paper and plastic, and that's it. So there's a lot of other stuff they could be recycling. But there you go. Anyway, on with tonight, crime special. So my special guest tonight is Kate and Chris, and we've had quite a good chat so far. And it's interesting to see the difference in American system and our system with a. Let's just see what's this. Let's just pull this one up. This is quite funny. No, I'm not like that. Just going to ask them nice questions. I'm going to let you guys out there ask the difficult questions. I'm just going to post them. Cobblestone M6. What are you like? So let's get back to the what's name in hand. So if you can click the like button, that will be much appreciated. Subscribe to the channel. Put a comment in the comments box. Ask a question of our special guest. I'm sure they'll be prepared to answer almost anything, within reason, obviously. So, Kate, are you still? Kate's a YouTuber. No, not a YouTuber, podcaster. So
yeah, I have not done the YouTube thing. I don't use YouTube, and so I don't publish to it.
Okay, but you do your podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So how's your podcast going?
I started 4.5 years ago, and have I just prior to logging on here released episode number 415. So it seems to be going okay. I'm gonna roll over 1 million downloads this summer, which is insane.
Well, that's impressive.
It's crazy. Like I have people say, like,
So-
"Oh, I've listened to every episode," and I'm like, "I'm so sorry. Like, my kids don't listen to me. Why would you?" But
I think Chris and I have something in common as well there. I've only been at this a short time. I've been at it a couple of years. I'm about 150 episodes in at the moment. But I've just this year started spreading out into doing YouTube as well as my podcast. So my podcasts go out as a podcast in audio, and that goes across all the popular platforms, the Apple, Google, Spotify, all of that lot. And now, because I record it in this format in StreamYard, I'm able to put it out as a YouTube as well. So lots of people are able to watch as well as to listen. So if they're in the car, they can listen on our podcast app, and if they're at home, they can sit and watch it on YouTube and to see the interviews that we've had. And I mean, Kate was a fantastic guest. She really was. I mean, Chris was all right.
so.
Yeah, so. I mean,
Kate is not, Frank. Absolutely not. No, Kate is not in Joe Rogan's corner, for sure.
No, she's much better than Joe Rogan.
No, clearly.
Yes. But I mean, we're all buddying Joe Rogan's, I suppose.
No.
No.
No, I don't want that. I started a podcast because I broke my back in 2014, and when you go on disability, you spend a couple of years shouting at the universe and resenting all of the things you don't have anymore and the like. And by the end of 2017, I really sort of literally lost my sense of competence, and I lost my voice, my feeling that I had anything to say, or that and I spent all this time in school and all this time working, and I had all these stories, and so I thought, well, I'll start a podcast. I'll do 10 or 20 episodes. I'll talk to people about what forensic psychology is and is not, and that'll be it. We'll be done after that. And here we are. 4.5 years later, I have drifted very far from it. I have made tremendously close friends, and Chris, you talked about the community that develops, and I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't looking for that, but I've absolutely found it, and it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, you've got to, because once you realize all your friends are losers, you got to find some more. And YouTube's great. Yes. No, I think the last 24 months or whatever they've been have really sorted out the men from the boys, to use excuse the chauvinism in that expression, but it's been great for me. I ditched a load of people that think the key to the universe is wearing their underpants on their face, and I've adopted just a load of wonderful people that I can actually have an intellectual chat with, and do Zoom calls. I mean, most of my friendship is over Zoom, and I it's, I just really appreciate it, Tim. I really appreciate it, because I've been after the truth now for, gosh, what is it? It was 21 years. 21 years ago, it was a lonely place to be. It was a lonely place to be. And you were branded all kinds of this if you dared to question, like, what the BBC was saying, or CNN, or Sky News, or whoever the media is. And now it's different. It's like it's almost like it's swinging the other way, and it's through the internet. Whether that means the internet's going to get controlled and shut down, God only knows. But I think it's really saved a lot of people, knowing that no, you're not mad, you're not insane. The world is run by greedy psychopaths. They do control you from birth. They do. I mean, we talked about the prison systems there. It's like, what if there's actually like a better system altogether than the British or the American? And Kate hinted at it. Education, teaching people how to connect with the universe from birth, rather than have it hidden from them their whole lives, and be kidded that they're this birth certificate identity that has to accrue hours in a job and cars in the driveway to find your meaning in life. Yes, sorry, not sure how we got down this avenue, but it's it's interesting. It's interesting. The whole podcasting thing's interesting. I've tended to go with the YouTube because I figured it would pay dividends quicker, if that makes sense. And I've probably done that at the sacrifice of my audio podcast. We average about, I don't know, I think, hello, Mighty Atom, much love to you too. I think we average about 500 downloads a day through 500 to 1,000. It hasn't really gone up, so I guess that there's something I'm not doing right there, which is probably that I focus on YouTube. There's not enough hours in a day for all this. There's not enough hours to be a parent, to be a speaker, to be a writer, to do a YouTube, to do this, to do your social media. I mean, it all gets beyond a joke, really. But you certainly have to master some part of it. And what I was just saying there earlier is with YouTube, I had to learn it. There's a guy called Nick Nimmins on YouTube. You're welcome, mate. And I went on there and I just learned YouTube. I learned why some channels work and why most fail.
Yeah.
You learn why.
It's the same with podcasts. I mean, Kate's probably had the same experience in the early days when you're setting out. You're putting content up there. It's the way you put the content up there. It's the way you put what you put in the descriptions, etc., etc. And it's the same with YouTube. It's what the algorithms are looking for, whether they'll promote your show up above others. It's what there are ways of because they don't look at the content as such. They look at what you tell it. So if you're telling it some stuff that it doesn't agree with, that it won't promote you. And let's just see what Neil's come up with something here. Honesty, integrity is the YouTube secret recipe. Keep it real. Absolutely.
Well, and I would argue, like, as a podcast, there are urban legends of sort about how do you chart, how do you get followers, and people say, oh, give us likes and reviews. I have worked with congratulations to that, Mighty Adam, by the way, like, good for you. I've worked directly with executives from Spreaker and Spotify and Apple because I wanted to know how does this work? And the answer is ratings and reviews mean absolutely nothing. Don't bother asking for them. They mean zero, because there are bots that can do it. And as soon as there are bots that can do it, the executives know better. So your show charts based on number of new subscribers per week. That's the magic ingredient. If you get people to subscribe to your show, doesn't matter whether they like it, doesn't matter what the content is, as well, contact the social media people that are involved in Good Pods, for instance, in Spreaker, in Podbean, in whatever, and ask them, hey, well, how do I get my show featured on the front page as one of your, like, I have a link for Apple to submit my show, and I run it like once a year to be submitted as one of their featured podcasts, which is not a chart, but it still puts me on the front page, and that's how people listen. And yet there's these really deep and entrenched beliefs that give me a 5-star rating and a review, and that's how I'll get in the charts, and that's how I'll get more followers. And I don't know how to convince people, like, that's really not where it's at. Like, it doesn't matter. So things like that are tough. And with YouTube, I didn't find that I didn't, likewise TikTok, that a presence there was going to build my show and work on monetization. And it's because I'm on disability, it's important to me that my show itself, it pays for itself, because I don't want it to be a drain on the family finances. I have 4 kids, which is a ton. And so I did some research on what's going to have the greatest amount of return. And that's where I put my energy, and that's where I put my focus. And the answer to that is show up on other people's shows and have them on yours. Run other people's promos and have them run yours. You like your promo, meaning an ad, a 30-second to 1-minute ad for your show. That's how you get your show in more ears, and the more ears hear your show, the more money you make.
Do you, Kate, when someone's listening to your show, do you sporadically remind them, could they subscribe to the show? Is that
Not ever.
Do you have anything in your like intro or outro that says if you could?
Nope.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because people are going to do it or not do it, whether they want to or not. And they are already using a podcatcher, whether you use Podcast Addict, Castbox, or Spotify or whatever. You're already using a podcatcher to do it. And if you like what you hear, you'll hit subscribe or you'll hit follow or whatever your podcatcher button is, so that you catch the next episode.
What would you say the one, if someone's to ask me what the one biggest thing for audio podcast is, and I don't know, because like I said, we don't do too well. We do better than probably 99% of podcasts out there, because of thousands.
You can find out specifically. If you tell me the name of your podcast, I can tell you your percentage.
Yeah. Well, I've got this, these people keep emailing me, and I get like I'm number 86 in the UK in life stories or something.
Oh, in Chartable?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Well, what's the name of your show?
Bought the T-shirt podcast. But like I say, we've never really
you are in the top 2% globally.
Yes. Get in.
I don't know how to here. I'll put it in our private chat because I don't know how to put it, but there's proof.
Oh my God.
I don't know what mine is then.
And Chris, Tim, what is the name of your audio podcast?
The Tim Hill Podcast.
Okay.
And then it's Ordinary People's Extraordinary Storage.
Yeah. Yours is in the top 10%.
Whoa.
Worldwide. Hang on a second, and I can give you that link. There's this website called Listen Notes. These are the things where, like, over 4 years and 400 episodes, learning these things and learning, what has bumped my percentage up and what has dropped my percentage down. And so doing more of the good stuff and ignoring the other stuff. So for instance, Instagram did nothing for me, and I also hate it, as an aside. And so about a year in, I decided I'm not going to do Instagram for 3 months. I'm not going to post for 3 months, and I'm going to see what happens. And if my percentage goes down, then I'll start doing Instagram again. Okay. And the answer was no change. And I was like, cool, great. I don't ever have to do that again. So, and Listen Notes is one of those. It's sort of like an IMDb for podcasts. It's the word listen, LISTEN NOTES, all one word, .com, and anybody can access it. And so when people are like, I want to hear an episode about such and such a case, for instance, where can I find an episode about, I don't know, Ted Bundy or Mary Bell or something like that? You can go to Listen Notes and plug it in, and you can get a list of all of the podcasts that have covered it. And you can go to Listen Notes and look up a podcast, and you can find globally what's your rank. And those are things that are helpful. There's an LS, a listen score. I don't really fully understand what that is, because that's more more changeable. through the week, but the global rank is pretty consistent. So it helps. And I mean, fair, Frank, if Chris should be number one, then Chris should come on my show and then I can give him more of an audience. That is the answer.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
My pleasure, Kate.
Do it. Do it.
I was just going to say, before I forget, have you ever chatted with Shaham Das?
I have not.
Okay, he's a doctor. He's been on my show. He hosts a YouTube channel. I don't know if you want to make a note of this, but it's called A Psych for Sore Minds.
I am familiar with it. Like, I've seen his posts. I haven't hit him up, but I can add him to the list. Over this past 2 weeks, I have been able to talk with some of my personal sort of, I don't want to go so far as heroes. I think that's overstating, but people that really were inspiring to me, authors, author Katherine Ramsland, who worked extensively. She's written 69 books. She worked extensively with Dennis Rader, who was the BTK serial killer in the US. And she's done a bunch of other things. And I had this realization that she wasn't coming on my show because I hadn't asked her. So if I asked, she might still not come on my show. Fair enough. But the only way she's going to come on is if I approach her and ask her. And I approached her and she was delightful. And so she came on, another true crime author came on, and a slam poet that I've always admired came on my show, all just because I asked. And so that's the best. And so I'm familiar with the channel, but again, so I'm hard of hearing. And so I don't watch YouTube because YouTube's captioning is terrible. And I only listen to podcasts at night so that I listen to 100% at all times, and that's how I hear things. And I don't like to have my screen on at night because I've been married for 22 years and I'd like to stay that way. So I don't want to keep my husband awake at night. And so YouTube has not been a thing that I have used, but I'm in the same, at least one Facebook group with A Psych for Sore Minds. So,
yeah, I hope you guys can hook up. He's got the sort of, English perspective on things. He's a really nice guy too. Okay, I'm really made up that you just sent me, because like I say, we haven't done much on it, but I am aware that I've got a friend who's really hot on all this kind of stuff. In fact, oh my gosh, what I'm never going to find it now. Never going to find it. He sent me a load of stuff.
Neil, you're so funny.
Yeah.
Try being deaf, Neil. That works for me. the deaf part. Actually, don't. It's not as fun and sexy as I make it look. Like, don't do the deaf thing.
So, looking at it's getting subscribers that really grows the channel. Then,
yeah. And now I can't speak for YouTube. I may eventually get grabbed and dragged kicking and screaming into YouTube if I am convinced that will deaf, Neil. I'm not dead yet. I'm getting better. I think I'll go for a walk. If I have to go into YouTube, I will. And I'll learn about it, but I really put my energy and focus into the audio podcast.
Yeah, because I was just audio up until this year, when because I've had to do the remote recording. I tried Zoom and it just wasn't right. I tried Riverside, I tried Squadcast. And I was on somebody's show that was using this platform, which is StreamYard. And since using that, I haven't looked back. And being on Podmatch as well, it's what I do is just exploded. So I record everything in StreamYard, gives me the YouTube, I can upload it to YouTube, and I can download the audio tracks as separate tracks, and then edit that and then put that up onto Buzzsprout, that then puts it across all the different platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, the lot. And I found that's now given me a double platform of being able to see my podcasts as well as listen to them.
No, I follow the logic. I just don't want it. That's what it was. I don't want it.
Fair enough.
And you know, you were saying, Chris, you were saying like there's only so many minutes in a day, and absolutely. You know, I tried during pandemic. I tried a TikTok because a friend of mine has a TikTok and has blown up on it, and so I thought, well, let's give it a shot. And the answer was, I could do okay, but I hated it. I just didn't like the process, and I certainly wasn't monetized. And it's not all about money. It's just about where am I going to put the time for the reward, and putting my, you know, even snippets of content on YouTube were not, or on TikTok rather, were not resulting in more subscribers significantly or more listens. So I decided I'm not gonna. And so I may eventually move into YouTube. I'm starting, hopefully this year, a second podcast with a friend of mine that'll be a sort of deep dive true crime serialized case on one that's never been covered before. And that may have some more visuals to go with it, not crime scene photos, because I feel like that's ghoulish, but you know, my co-host and I speaking with each other, and some of the police report information and maps and the like. And so I could see maybe branching out then if we need to, but right, you know, podcasting, I started it as a hobby. And the fact that it's now a hobby that pays for itself is delightful. And my one rule that I set out for myself is that I'm going to do this as long as it stays more fun than stress.
Absolutely.
And that's what it has been. It's been a delight.
And then you get to come on shows like this.
I do. It's amazing.
And this is, I mean, this is billed as a crime special, but I think we've strayed off the straight and narrow slightly. But I think what we're covering is really good. I mean, particularly for Chris and I, growing our channels. I mean, Chris's channel is doing fairly well, and I did a podcast with Chris some while back now, and I had a look the other day, and it had close on sort of 4,700, I think it was, something like that, downloads, which ain't bad for an old boy like me with a bit of a story. Got a little bit of a story.
That's the thing, though, isn't it?
It's having that niche.
You've got to have something, you know, and no disrespect to people that don't have some. Well, I mean, everyone's got something, but I mean, it's a sad indictment of the times we live in that because I've been in the military, young people think that's cool. It's just the perverseness of life, and I never make anything. Well, I let's just say I try and be honest about it, but you know, it really is that thing. I mean, YouTube, for example, when you put a video out on YouTube, you're striving for one thing, and if you don't, you shouldn't call yourself a YouTuber. That is, for the first 100 people that see that thumbnail come up, whether it's on their feed, you know, recommended, wherever, the first 100 people, 4 people have got to click on it. That's it. That's just that is how to make it on YouTube. It's called the CTR, click-through rate, and I've never focused on it. I kind of sort of was aware of it but one of my, I know people were coming up for 1 million subscribers now. And they kind of make you aware of such things, and you really have to get your head around it. It's I mean, YouTube is like jumping on a motorbike and thinking you can become a performance racer without like doing any training.
Yeah.
Just because you know how to go, and it's really worth learning, and it's not rocket science. You've just got to get in there. You've got to hit the people with what they want to hear. Your thumbnail's got to be engaging, bordering on, and I even hate to say this, but like clickbait it. It's got to be. You can't just say, I chat with a nice guy called Tim. Right? No one who. I'll put a picture of me and you. Why would anyone? Why? And this is the nature of but you find your trueness within that, and once you start making a name for yourself, people know that you're genuine, so you've got a good guest or whatever it is. But it's I mean, it's been good
because I've not concentrated on thumbnails at all, really. I mean, one of the I put a picture up of the ship's cat as a thumbnail, and that got within the first couple of days over 120 odd sort of clicks and downloads. But generally, what you see on my it just comes up with a picture of this as the front. So perhaps I need to reevaluate the way that I'm doing things. And
well, I mean,
because every single person I speak to, and I've got a fairly niche where I interview people about their lives, and I ask them where they were born, describe what it's like where they grew up, the schools they went to, the education they got, look for their work life, and it's all about leaving a legacy for future generations. So in 100 years' time, people should be able to look back at this and see what people were doing at this time frame in history. So Alex on Podmatch was saying you need to sort out who your avatar is. Well, my avatar hasn't been born yet. My avatar is in the future. Somebody that's researching, say, their family history, and I've interviewed somebody in their family that they can go back and look at and see what they did in this time period. So that's so I could effectively do a thumbnail for each different person that I've done and just put their mugshot up, but with something about them on it, and see where that goes.
You could also ask your existing audience.
Tim, can I just got to duck out for 1 minute?
Yeah, no worries, Chris. I'll drop you down.
Try asking your existing audience who would they like to hear you talk with, because it's a powerful entry. I found, like, I once in a while in my Facebook group or my Discord server, I'll ask people, give me some names. Doesn't matter how big, how small. Give me some names. Who would you like, whether it's your neighbor or a published author or actor or whatever. Because when you go to that person then and you say, hey, one of my listeners has specifically requested that you come on my show, and my show is comparable to yours in the sense that it is collecting stories. It's just less structured. It's more about, like, I follow my guest's lead, and my job as host is to ask questions that aren't boring, and sometimes to, tell my own story, make it a conversation rather than an interview. I don't want to be like, that's an excellent question. Like, I don't want to do the, the daytime TV thing. I want to have it be that experience where if you're at a party and you're not feeling real comfortable and you sort of listening in on somebody else who's having a fantastic conversation, that's what I want. That's my goal. And I have been honored to talk to people from all walks of life and all styles. And once in a while, I'll say, "Give me some names. Give me some ideas of people to look up to, to look up and to contact." And I'll try. And some of them don't answer. That's fair. But like I said, in the past 2 weeks, I've had these people that I stopped watching TV 5 or 10 years ago because my hearing got bad. But these are people that I've seen on TV or I've read their books, and now they're talking to me in a one-on-one Zoom. Holy cow, this is amazing. So Neil, it starts hard. It's a steep learning curve. You've got to learn a lot of things in a fairly quick succession. And that's what my TikTok is, if I'm going to put a plug there, although I don't really care whether anybody watches it. But my TikTok is, if you look up IWB podcast, my show is Ignorance Was Bliss. So IWB podcast, it's how to start a podcast. That's all I've left up there. And it's meant to be sort of there's a checklist, and you can also go to my website, which is iwb.com, iwbpodcast.com, and you can see a written version of the checklist there and get some ideas on ways to get started. But there's a lot to learn, and it's a steep learning curve. And early on, man, I'd spend an hour learning one thing, one way to upload an episode or one editing trick, and I would be like, you know what? I learned a thing today. We're good. I'm going to bed. Like, that's all I can do. And that's enough. It's a hobby, and you shouldn't learn all of it at once. And I can't count the number of hours I've put in to my show. 400 episodes, 3,000 hours total. Like, I do full-time work for part-time pay. This is what I tell people. But it's pretty cool to have worked up to the point of getting part-time pay when I didn't earn anything for a long time. And in fact, paid to do this hobby for a long time. So it's a process. And if it turns out to not be the right hobby for you, that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
You tried it. But one of my episodes, and I don't know the number now because 400 episodes, but one of my episodes is about the concept of imposter syndrome and whether you feel like you belong in this space, and whether so I created a list of, I call it podcaster bingo, and it's 30 cards that you can just print out on a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And the way it works is that as soon as you cross off any one of the squares, you are a legitimate podcaster. And the center square, they're all different. All 30 cards are different, but the center square on all of them is hit publish. And as soon as you've hit publish, you are a podcaster. You belong here.
The thing with podcasters is that it's consistency, and they reckon that if you get past the first, is it 5 episodes, that's when most people drop off and leave it. I guess we're slightly different. I mean, you're over 400. Chris is somewhere around about the same. I'm 150 odd in, so we're kind of the future. And I've got another 20 odd lined up at the moment to do. I did 3 this week already.
We are.
Yeah.
We absolutely. I mean, and it's okay to own that you're doing good work. You're doing important work, and you may not see the returns for it in the way you expected or the way that you hoped, but there still are returns from it.
Yeah. But your tip on getting people to hit that subscribe within the first sort of new subscribers, I think that's probably going to be a way forward for me at the moment. So not bothered whether you click the like button or not, hit the subscribe button. Please.
I checked. I'm
Subscribe.
subscribed to you both. So even though I don't use YouTube, I'm subscribed. It's a start.
Thank you so much. But
finding content is the right.
it's the
Well,
easy bit.
okay, you're absolutely right. So I'm reading Neil's comment that says it's finding content.
All right, let's
Making
bring
them
that
is
up.
the easy bit. It's the writing content and research that's hard. Okay. I don't write my episodes at all. In fact, I start so I can show you because it's in front of me. I start every episode with a completely blank piece of paper. That's it. And I go through a list of housekeeping on, gathering their social media and asking some, explaining a little bit about what they should expect from my show and the process and then when I'm done, you'll get something like this. It's a list of timestamps when there's been noises that have happened. I scribble down ideas for titles of the episode because I pull the title from something my guest has said. And I keep notes of what is it we talked about, because it's really hard to, mine run about an hour and it can be really difficult to remember a full hour's conversation. Even if I edit it, it's still difficult to remember it all. So I sort of jot down notes, and I don't prep. Mine is meant to be a conversation. It's not meant to be research. My upcoming show is going to be research and going to be content and writing based, and that's going to be a different challenge. It's going to be a different experience, but I won't have to learn how to record and edit and publish because that is what I already know. So I'm playing to my strengths. My training as a psychologist and my strength is in talking to people and getting your story, because I get a lot of people, and I mean well-known people, actors, published authors, podcasters that blow me out of the water, things like that, who tell me, I don't know if I should come on your show. I'm boring. I don't have stories to tell. And I'm like, you're just waving a red flag at me, because that's a dare is what that is. Like, I guarantee that you have stories.
I take that as a dare as well.
I can find your story. You trust me. And I will honor that trust and respect it. And I say this as though my show is perfectly wholesome. And let's be real clear that it's not. My show is not safe for work on the regular. And I enjoy that too. Like sometimes, my most recent guest that I recorded with, she said, I teach at a Catholic university, and so I can't swear, and I'm not comfortable with that. I'm like, cool. I can do that. I can behave. And then there's other people who are dropping F-bombs like it's their job. And I'm like, all right, well, that's the direction we're going to go today. Okay.
Well, I try not to use any bad language at all on any of my podcasts. So I don't normally have to say that to guests, but I always go in cold. I have a very rough idea of who I'm going to have a chat with, and particularly if you're doing 4 or 5 interviews a day, you don't always have time to get that amount of information about somebody. So I'm going in cold on all of my chats, and I start off with a basic format, and then we'll run through and we'll see where it takes us. And I've had some as short as 20 minutes, not very many, and some as long as an hour and a couple of hours. Yours, Kate, was an hour and 20 minutes.
The fact that you shut me up in under 2 hours, good for you.
Oh, no. Well, Chris, we cut it in half because there was a distinct end to one part and a beginning to the next part, which were two totally different episodes. And the second one was a real gritty, tough one to listen to and to do. And anybody that wants to have a real insight into some raw emotion, that's a pretty good one to have a watch of. But all of my episodes are all very, very different. So I don't actually have a niche as such, but I do have a format of people's lives that we've covered over the last 150 odd episodes. So I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm not bothered about making a huge amount of money out of it. In fact, I'm not bothered about making money. I can just about scrape by on my pension. And if I do make a few bob, all well and good. But my driving force is to leave a legacy for future generations so they can look back on this time in history and have a good idea of what life was like now. There you go. There's me plug.
It's an excellent, it's good, it's a mission statement of sorts. And I think that's important. I call myself a story collector. That's what I do. Neil, I don't know which of us that you're speaking to, but I flatly refuse to answer the question of what's the most interesting interview I've done, because I've had a few not interesting ones, which I won't name, because it's not up to me to decide so much. Like, my job is to be in the moment with you when we're talking and to collect your story and then edit it and introduce it and then create an outro that puts you in the best possible light. That's my job. But I can't make it interesting for everybody. And for my audience, it's sort of understood that my show isn't meant to be just listen. When I hear somebody say, like, I've listened to every episode, like I said, I'm like, oh, are you okay? I'm so sorry. And because it's meant to be hop in, hop out. Like, when you're interested in what I'm doing, plug in. And if you're not interested, or if it's a topic that might be bothersome to you in some way, then don't listen. I'm going to come out with another episode in a couple of days. And so just wait to the next one and see. Most interesting kind of depends on, like, I've had some guests sort of turn it around so that they're interviewing me. That's always wild. I've had the one that people sort of do a double take about when I talk about is that I had the same guest on. I've had some repeat guests, and one of my repeat guests is a guy named Chris Roy. He is a convicted murderer who is currently, right this second, in a maximum security facility in Mississippi, down in the south of the U.S. And he calls me on his contraband cell phone. And we talk about, what is it like? What did you do? And you talked about, you said you don't sort of vet your judges, your guests. You don't research your guests. Neither do I. Like, I try really hard not to learn a ton about them because I don't want to steer their conversation. I want them to tell me their story. But when I know I'm talking to somebody who's actively in prison, I'm going to look up the story so that I know he's not making stuff up, or telling lies or minimizing his crimes. And he's so insightful, and he's just a fascinating guy. And just the fact that, like, when I worked inside a prison, I couldn't have a cell phone. Staff doesn't have cell phones inside prison. You can't do that in the US. But inmates can smuggle them in, and that's how I contacted him. And he, in fact, runs his own business out of his cell as a book publicist. And so once in a while, if you get an email from someone saying, hey, I have an author who's coming out with a new book, are you interested in talking to the author for a publicity tour? You might be talking to my buddy Chris, who's behind bars.
Outrageous. Crikey, guys. We're at 2 hours. Where'd that go? We've been at this for 2 hours. Wow, it's been incredible. I've enjoyed myself this last 2 hours, and anybody that's joined in, hopefully, they've enjoyed it as well. Guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks right back. I do, and you've got an audience here to serve as support or as pressure, social pressure. Please pressure them to come on my show. I'm formally requesting. I don't care about like, rate, subscribe my show. I care about please pressure Chris and Tim to come on my show.
Wow.
Yes, I've emailed you already, Kate. So there you go.
Ideal. There we go. See?
Yeah.
And I'll come back onto your show.
Do it. Dude, we haven't
We'll do
recorded
that.
for mine. We've only recorded for yours so far. So yeah,
I know,
email me
yeah.
and I'll send.
We've
I actually
got to
so
find some time.
you know
We've gotta
my
find some
my extra thing is that I have COVID right now, and so I've blocked out the next week because I felt fine yesterday. That's when I tested positive. I feel less fine today, so just in case, I blocked out for a week or so. But then after that, let's play.
Dive in. Let's have another go.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Let me just drop you down. And if you're just running on for the post show, that'd be great. I'll just put the ending on. Wow, what a fantastic couple of hours that's been. I think that deserves one of these. So thank you guys for joining in tonight. Neil, Mike the Atom, the Diamond, Angelo Zap. Thanks so much for the questions that you posted. It's been I've really enjoyed this evening. It has been great. So if you want to join us again next week it's a bit of a local special, but it's probably pertaining to every local council. I've invited all the local councillors on, the ones that's been re-elected, ones that's been newly elected, to come on the show and tell us what they're going to do for our local area. And I'm going to put them under the cosh a bit. If they don't turn to, because they're public servants, they have a duty to come onto the show. So hopefully next week we'll have quite a few local councillors coming on to tell their piece, and I'm going to put them under pressure a bit. And hopefully with your help, you'll be able to give us a hand. So in the meantime, thanks very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself this evening, and please subscribe to the channel. That's what you need to do. You need to just click that subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, by the way. So you're free to just click the subscribe button, but it does help the channel. So here you go then. Thanks very much.
The Tim Heal Thirsty Thursday live stream from 7 until 9 weekly. Here's your host, Tim Heal.